6543210. I call today's hearing to order. I look forward to welcoming Ranking Member Langford and other members of the subcommittee who are on their way. And I welcome all of our witnesses to today's discussion about the role of the federal Chief Human Capital Officers, known as CHCOs. It's kind of a fun name. A more effective and efficient federal government starts with a better federal workforce. It doesn't matter how much we spend or how many laws we pass. If we don't have the right people in the right jobs, our federal government won't be successful in providing the services that my constituents in Arizona count on every day. CHCOs play a critical role in this effort. They oversee day-to-day workforce management to ensure the right employees are hired, trained, managed, promoted, and retained. The Chief Human Capital Officer role was created in the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to elevate human capital efforts within agencies. After 20 years, it's important to explore what works about the CHCO role, what additional authorities they need to be successful and innovative, what gets in the way of their success, and how Congress can set up CHCOs for success. It's especially critical that Congress tackle the last part. The Government Accountability Office has included federal human capital management on its high-risk list for more than 20 years. Numerous recent reports have highlighted the immediate need to address federal workforce innovation. Even the National Commission on Military and Public Service, the brainchild of Senator John McCain of Arizona, spent significant time discussing how to fix federal human resources, regulations, and statutes. Our committee is starting to make progress. We recently passed my Bipartisan Chance to Compete Act, which I partnered with Ranking Member Langford to pass. That bill makes important improvements to how agencies assess applicants and has strong stakeholder support from manager and employee groups. We also hope to advance Senator Langford's Trust in Public Service Act soon. Today's hearing will build on that momentum. The merit system, which is the foundation of our federal workforce policy, remains the ideal and should never be weakened. However, it is wrong to say that the merit system is the same thing as the existing personnel system. We have a personnel system from the 1940s that uses assessment criteria, often from as far back as the 1970s, and a hodgepodge of recent piecemeal changes that make the whole system more complex. We need to do better, both for federal workers and the American people who rely on them. I want to thank our witnesses for the testimony they've submitted today. You four represent an incredible cross-section of experience, and I thank you for taking the time to attend. I know that Senator Langford is on his way to the hearing, and so I'll have him complete his opening statement when he arrives. It is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if you will all please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Now I'll introduce each of our witnesses so they may present their opening statements. I ask each of our witnesses to keep their opening statements to 5 minutes, but your full written statements will be submitted for the record. So our first witness today is the Honorable Mike Regas. Mr. Regas was confirmed as the Deputy Director of the Office of Personnel Management and then served simultaneously in that role as well as the Acting Director of OPM and the Acting Deputy Director of Management of the Office of Management and Budget. Mr. Regas, thank you for joining us here today. You're now recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Sinema, Ranking Member Langford, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on this important topic. My name is Michael Regas, and I served as both the Acting Director of OPM and the Acting Deputy Director for Management at OMB. In those capacities, I had the privilege of serving as both the Chair and the Vice Chair of the CHCO Council. People are the most important resource of any organization. I've worked in the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and in state and federal government, and that principle holds true no matter what the organization. The federal government has some of the most dedicated public servants Americans could ask for, providing diligent and competent service to the American people every day. But as we are here to discuss, we still fall short as a federal government when it comes to attracting and retaining the best and brightest to federal service and ensuring that poor performance and misconduct are effectively addressed. From my experience working with the CHCO Council, I can say they are a valuable resource and advisor to the OPM Director. They provide important feedback and suggestions for improvements to personnel policy, And while they advise on and implement personnel policy, there are also limits to what they or OPM can do. And here's why. First, there must be a realization that OPM does not oversee the entire federal workforce. Congress has created numerous carve-outs and exceptions to Title V, placing entire categories of employees and agencies outside the purview of OPM. Second, because of those exceptions and continued creation of new authorities, the landscape for managing federal personnel has become overly complex and bureaucratic. Third, over time, the level of seniority of individuals designated by their agency heads as CHCOs has become less senior. For example, if you look at the composition of the CHCO Council from its first annual report in FY 2003, you will see that the CHCO Council comprised largely of presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed officials, such as the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness of the Department of Defense, and Assistant Secretaries for Management and Administration from other cabinet agencies. That is no longer the case. But even in the current environment, with all its complexities and limitations, real progress can be made with respect to improving how the federal government manages its most important resource, its people. Here are a few examples of recent actions that yielded positive results and can be built upon to continue to improve how we manage personnel and federal agencies that serve the American people. With the right leadership from Congress, OPM, and the White House, substantial progress and reform can continue to be made. In my roles both at OPM and OMB, I oversaw multiple efforts to address the underlying issues inhibiting the federal workforce from being viewed as a first-in-class employer while advancing merit systems principles and strengthening the state of the civil service. When our team came to OPM, we faced the largest background investigation backlog in history with an inventory of 725,000 cases and timeliness that exceeded a year to receive a top-secret clearance. This situation made it difficult for agencies to carry out their missions and recruit qualified employees in a timely manner. Because of the tireless efforts of both our career and non-career leadership, we were able to eliminate the backlog and safely reduce the amount of time it takes to conduct and adjudicate a background investigation. We also innovated to improve the hiring process, promoting skills-based assessments over applicant self-assessments, demonstrating how to successfully reduce candidate selection time from 45 days to 16 days, while vastly improving the number of qualified candidates to hire. This methodology should be more widely used as hiring efforts which rely on self-assessments often yield lists of candidates hiring managers do not deem qualified for the job, resulting in cancellation of the posting, frustrating both candidates and hiring managers. As acting director of OPM, I advocated the expanded use of shared certificates to make them available government-wide, which would allow qualified candidates who are not hired at one agency to be hired immediately by another agency looking for qualified candidates for that same type of position. This pilot has been in place at HHS and should be expanded across the government. Use of skills-based assessments and shared certificates are things CHCOs can do today at their own agencies and would greatly reduce the amount of time to hire, save money for agencies, improve the experience of job applicants, and demonstrate merit systems principles hiring can be effective and efficient. While at OPM, I also made clear that our mission was to support other agencies and do everything we could to help them execute on their mission. One great example of that was our work with the VA as we responded to the global pandemic. In 2020 alone, the VA was able to hire over 50,000 employees, including doctors, nurses, and frontline responders to the pandemic because of actions we took at OPM to provide VA the flexibilities and authorities it needed to move quickly. With leadership that is willing to focus on addressing these challenges, there is much that can be done. We know what works, and we've demonstrated how concrete improvements can be achieved for taxpayers, agencies, and federal employees. I'm encouraged by the bipartisan legislation you have sponsored in the Chance to Compete Act, which codifies many of these reforms to improve federal hiring and personnel practices. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to answering your questions and working with you to strengthen the efforts I was proud to help lead during my time as chairman of the CHCO Council. Thank you.
Our second witness is Angie Bailey. I'd first like to congratulate Angie on her retirement last month after 40 years of service to our country, and I hope that you enjoyed your trip to Sedona last week. It is a wonderful place to reflect and recharge, and you are always welcome back in Arizona. I'm sure your former team on the border misses you. Ms. Bailey testified before this committee a few months ago in her role as the DHS Chief Human Capital Officer, where she was widely credited with bringing order and modernizing DHS's HR programs. Before that, Ms. Bailey was the highest-ranking civil servant at OPM, leading their policy division and serving as COO. Ms. Bailey, thank you for your work, and thank you for joining us today. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you. And I must say, I loved Sedona. It was absolutely beautiful. So good afternoon, Chairwoman Sinema and Ranking Member Langford, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I appreciate you inviting me to speak about what is needed to empower CHCOs to ensure HR practices support agencies. As you just mentioned, I have recently retired from the federal government after a career that spanned 40 years. Almost 35 of those 40 years have been spent in human capital. Over half of my career was spent at the Department of Defense. And in 2007, I was appointed to the Senior Executive Service at the Office of Personnel Management in several different roles. And then finally, my position in 2016 until I retired at the end of 2021 was as the DHS Chief Human Capital Officer. But just as important as the positions that I've held in the agencies that I've served is the experience that I've lived over those 4 decades witnessing events that have touched the lives of our federal workforce, myself and my family included. These events, some historic and some that never actually touched the headlines, have shaped so much of who I am, what I think, and how I believe that the CHCOs have the ability to have a positive impact on their agency's mission. It's important to understand that there is more to being a CHCO than simply providing human resource policy as the CHCO Act implies. And it certainly takes more than the CHCO Council to address all of the issues impacting the federal workforce and their families. So yes, not only does the CHCO Act need modernization, but so does how we approach the entire ecosystem which the federal workforce accomplishes, in which the federal workforce accomplishes their agency's mission. So I have several recommendations that I'd like to speak to. Number one, humans are not capital and they are not resources. We need to ensure that we start investing in our employees and their families. Investing in their mind, their body, and their spirit is not woo-woo. It is actually a mission imperative. Timely budgets are critical. Almost every single year, agencies are faced with a continuing resolution. Most drastic of all are shutdowns. If agencies are to deliver all that is expected of them each year, then a budget must be passed and ready to begin on October 1st of each fiscal year. 3, alternative futures planning is essential. For the most part, agencies struggle to plan for the future, and the lack of doing so has a ripple effect across the entire agency, and nowhere is it felt more so than within the human resource needs. 4, it takes the entire C-suite. Nothing is accomplished by the CHCO alone. There's an interplay between the CFO, the CIO, the CAO, the CSO, the list goes on. And the point is that we cannot underestimate the value that it takes an entire team in order to deliver and pull together to ensure that our agency's missions are accomplished. We need simplification and flexibility. There are over 100 different hiring authorities on the books. Some are for specific agencies, some are for across the entire federal government. No one can keep up with, manage, or use this many hiring authorities, nor are they necessary. Agencies should be able to seek highly qualified applicants from all available sources. The DHS Enhanced Hiring Act proposal is an excellent example of how the simplified hiring process could become available for all agencies to be able to use. We need to modernize classification, qualifications, and awards. The federal classification system is outdated and it exacerbates the pay and compensation disparity. One thing Congress could do is modify Title VI, which is DHS's cybersecurity talent management system, to include all agencies and all positions for civil service reform to become a reality across the federal government. Number 7 is that we have billion-dollar operations, and we've got this. To put this into perspective, DHS's budget this fiscal year is over $122 billion. It employs close to 250,000 employees, and it has 22 different components and a mind-boggling 90 committees and subcommittees overseeing its operation. Yet despite all that tremendous responsibility and accountability, we still must go to OPM to get permission to hire one rehired annuitant, to get awards over $10,000, to do VSIPs, and a whole host of other things, including direct hire authority. There is no business anywhere else in the entire world that would accept this kind of practice or even find this micromanagement sane. And even more surreal or perplexing is the fact that there is a belief that all of this requires legislation, that those regulations within OPM's purview cannot be changed without congressional support, which leads me to the last point, which is congressional partnership. Everything calls for a strong partnership, collaborative partnership between the subcommittees and other interested congressional parties, including the unions and our veteran servicing organizations and good government groups, if we're going to see any type of change and modernization. I thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you today. I appreciate your willingness to listen and to entertain the idea of helping us help you make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third witness is Terry Kyrsten, the President and CEO of the Congressionally Chartered National Academy of Public Administration, and before that, a career member of the Senior Executive Service. Ms. Kyrsten is well known for her bipartisan efforts to bring together executives and academics with different political philosophies to discuss good government practices and solutions. Ms. Kyrsten, thank you for joining us today. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Chair Sinema, Ranking Member Langford, and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I am a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and have served as its president since January of 2017. In addition to my experience leading the Academy, I spent 3.5 years as a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the U.S. Department of Labor and 8.5 years as a Senior Executive in the Department of Defense. So I have personal experience with the topic of today's hearing. I've been a hiring manager, a subject matter expert, reviewer of applicant files, a member of senior executive hiring and interview panels, and a member of the Army's Senior Executive Policy Board. While serving as the Executive Deputy to the Commanding General of Army Materiel Command, I was responsible for the strategic management of over 80 senior executives, 1/3 of the Army's total allocation, and the oversight of nearly 70,000 civilians in nearly every career field stationed around the world. So I know how challenging it can be to make the federal personnel processes work. The National Academy of Public Administration also has deep expertise in federal human resource management topics. Over 50 of our fellows claim experience in federal HR, and of those, many themselves were federal chief human capital officers. Across our history, many agencies have directly engaged the Academy and our fellows for support in managing and modernizing their own HR systems. The Academy agrees with GAO in its determination that strategic human capital management is an area of high risk in the federal government. In 2019, we identified the need to modernize and reinvigorate the public service as one of 12 grand challenges in public administration. And our work in this area over the past 5 years has been extensive. We delivered last March our congressionally directed assessment of the Office of Personnel Management, and just last month we provided our assessment of the National Cybersecurity Training System, also at Congress's direction. Our fellows provided an action plan to the Biden administration on administrative steps it could take in its first year to actually modernize and reinvigorate the public service. And in 2017 and 18, we completed 2 papers outlining a fundamentally new vision for the future of federal service, No Time to Wait, Parts 1 and 2. Taken collectively, our research communicates a vision of a federated civil service system based on talent management and driven by mission accomplishment and merit systems principles. But we've made little progress in achieving this vision, and the pandemic has only made systemic reform more difficult. Significant spending programs to support national recovery, combined with nationwide reimagining by individual workers of their employment preferences, have created even greater numbers of vacancies across the federal workforce. The urgent need to hire new employees to manage these new programs, the perpetual shortage of individuals with technical skills in cybersecurity, data analytics, and other STEM fields, and the growing attention on developing government programs with a focus on customer experience and expectations have created a perfect storm. The role of the CHCO is more important now than ever. But we cannot modernize that role and then leave them in the antiquated system we currently have and expect different results. We must undertake a systemic renovation of the entire federal personnel system, and the Academy's assessment of OPM is the place to start. That study provides a roadmap of actions needed to raise the attention on and the value of human capital for addressing critical workforce issues by reframing OPM's mission and affording the agency the foundation required to lead strategic human capital management government-wide. Within such a system, CHCOs can be empowered to be the strategic personnel leaders within their agencies that the Chief Human Capital Officers Act envisioned 20 years ago. The CHCOs I know recognize that the government's effectiveness is the product of its people. They understand the potential impact on the daily functions of government, and they relish their position on the front lines of mission accomplishment. But making this construct real will require commitment and support both from the administration and Congress. It will also require a concerted effort to improve the capacity of the human resource community government-wide. Recruiting, developing, and retaining the right talent should be a priority nonpartisan concern. Whether you believe government should be smaller or larger, we should all agree that the government needs a highly skilled workforce to serve the American people. In this case, the COVID-19 pandemic may have a silver lining. It has already forced myriad changes in what we believe possible and driven adaptation in distributed work arrangements, technology, and hiring flexibilities. We dare not waste the opportunity that this tragedy has created. There simply is no more time to wait. Chair Sinema, that concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Our final witness is Steve Linkart. Mr. Linkart is currently the Executive Director of the National Federation of Federal Employees, the third largest and the oldest federal labor union. Previously, he served as a career member of the Senior Executive Service, including as the Executive Director of the Merit System Board Protection. I'd also like to thank Mr. Linkart for his tireless work on trying to help federal wildland firefighters. He's worked closely with my staff on this issue that is of vital importance to our nation as fires have become more deadly and our heroes risk their lives to protect us. Mr. Linkart, thank you for joining us today. You're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Langford. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for that warm intro. Your staff has been absolutely fantastic, as you have as well, looking out for our wildland firefighters as they begin another year out in the forest for longer and more dangerous seasons every year. I am Steve Linkart. I'm the Executive Director of the National Federation of Federal Employees. I am a career member of the Senior Executive Service. During my federal executive time, I served in leadership positions at the Department of Homeland Security. I also worked with the Federal Salary Council, FPRAC, and also served on the Executive Committee of the Small Agency Council. But as the chairman mentioned, I was also executive director of the Merit Systems Protection Board. As we all know in this room, that agency is an independent agency responsible for safeguarding a fair, effective, and efficient workforce for 2 million federal employees. And I am very happy to say that as of last night, with consent of the Senate, we finally have our nominees passed out, and they're ready to get to work over at the MSPB to start working on a 5-year backlog. They've been without a quorum there for 1,880 days. So I wish them luck as they try to chip away at that backlog. My overarching message today is to preserve the merit system principles codified in law in 5 U.S.C. 2301. The merit system principles are there to inform policies regarding recruitment, selection, development, and maintaining an efficient and effective workforce. The merit principles are timeless. They were written 40 years ago. Even though they were based on things that happened in the past, they're actually written for the future. And they're written because of the mistakes that we made over the past 245 years trying to run a government. So somewhere within the confines of the merit principles is a relationship between OPM and the chief human capital officers of the executive branch. This is a complex relationship with overlapping definitions. They both are facilitators and enforcers of human capital for the government. So we ask ourselves questions: how much leash do you give to CHCOs to administer the workforce under their charge? How much autonomy should a CHCO have to ensure that they're still adhering to merit systems principles? And there's also structural improvements that we can explore as well, too. A more proactive use of the CHCO Council. We can create a robust OPM advisory council consisting of members of the public and private sectors, labor and management, academia, and other groups to bring innovation to HR. And I personally am in favor of installing more career reserve leadership at OPM and for CHCOs and chief administrative officers across the government. And there's also policy improvements to explore. I'm not a huge fan of direct hire authority, although I think it does have its place. I'm not a huge fan of the accepted service, although I think it does have its place. But I do think that there's a right way and a wrong way to do both of those things, and the wrong way is to do it without protecting merit. But if we learn nothing else from the last part of the last decade, is that we need to get a grip on the mighty river of non-career political appointees across the executive branch. Most Americans do not know about the thousands of political appointees that come and go, non-career executives and Schedule C appointees. And I'm not against political appointees. I was one, but these jobs are wildly in violation of anything resembling anything merit-based. It is a type of secret workforce inside the federal workforce. Some are hired with questionable skills and experience. Some come from fake think tanks that are covers for dark money. And the career managers and staff cannot hold them accountable for their performance or for their conduct. And Madam Chair, I never bring a problem without bringing a solution. One solution is to simply allow career managers and executives to supervise political appointees, those that are not confirmed by the Senate. Political appointees serve at the pleasure of a president, but they are subject to the same accountability, transparency, and performance laws that apply to everyone else. If you're worried about career employees blocking appointees' agendas, you shouldn't be, because if those agendas are legitimate, merit principles will protect those missions too. But very disturbingly, in the last part of the last decade, again, not now, in the last part of the last decade, we saw an unparalleled uptick in dark money investments to move operatives into the government under the cloak of political hiring exemptions. On the way out, these same operatives test drove a new authority, Schedule F, created by executive order, that authorized the permanent hiring of political appointees under an unchecked special classification of employee that is above accountability and transparency. And unless you are wildly corrupt in mind, you'll understand how offensive and dangerous this idea is to an open and free democracy. However, I think these dark forces like what they saw. I think we're going to see a return of Schedule F type tactics in the future, and and it's all going to be pushing secret agendas on taxpayers' dime. So in conclusion, I thank the subcommittee for prioritizing the relationship between OPM and CHCOs and starting the conversations to make OPM and CHCOs the most effective they can be in the interest of a fair, effective, and efficient and honest government. And I look forward to working with the subcommittee on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize our subcommittee ranking member, Senator James Lankford, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much. The four of you, thank you for being here. It's incredibly important to be able to be in this conversation, and I really appreciate you getting this out, getting it on the record, and so we can continue to be able to build on the conversations we've had in past hearings and to work towards actual solutions. Chairwoman and I have talked about these issues often. We bring these issues up, and we're working towards actually getting to pragmatic solutions, as some of them have even been mentioned today in some of your opening testimony. So I appreciate that very much, and we'll look forward to ongoing dialogue with that. We are at a critical point. We have quite a few federal employees that are eligible for retirement. It continues to drag on with the hiring and the length of time it takes to hire. The latest numbers that we have is now 92 days to be able to get to a hire. That is actually better than it has been by a few days, but still embarrassing for anything that is in the private sector. I've yet to run into a single company that goes to a job fair, interviews someone at the job fair, and says, I'll get back to you in 3 months in the process. We're at a very difficult spot to be able to get through the hiring time. We've got to be able to make some decisive steps to be able to get to the future, and that is going to begin with improving our hiring process, and hopefully we'll begin with some of the conversations we have today. Best and brightest candidates really are not going to wait 3 months to be able to go through the process. And as I've talked to several folks, the folks that work in federal warehouses and others that have other options for other jobs they could literally start on this afternoon are certainly not going to wait 3 months to be able to go through that process. In 2019, the Commission on National Military and Public Service made recommendations to increase our ability to hire, train, and retain federal employees. The Commission noted that federal human capital policy is often focused on short-term fixes, which added more complexity to the federal hiring system, as has already been mentioned today, with over 100 different hiring authorities there. Whenever we have a hearing on this topic, that always comes up, is the number of hiring authorities, and just about everyone brings up at some point direct hire, expedited hiring, non-competitive hiring, every time and to say, we have 100 different authorities, we don't like any of them, or we only use a fraction of those. Our hiring system is definitely broken, and it shows every time we get to one of these hearings and someone else asks for another way to be able to get around it. We've got to be able to resolve that. The COVID pandemic, I also declare to be the largest pilot program ever done by the federal government on innovation and managing people and hiring and no basic oversight. We should take the lessons learned from that and start implementing them quickly. My fear is that after a 2-year large-scale pilot, that we're now going to start studying what we studied during that time period and spend another decade trying to evaluate, and the status quo will just remain. That will be disappointing if that actually occurs. At this point, we've got to be able to resolve some things. So let me just lay a couple of things on the table that I want to be able to talk about as well. We have highly qualified spouses of our active duty military who move with their family every 3 years, often to very remote location at bases and posts around the country and around the world. They struggle to be able to find employment when they move every 2 or 3 years. Why not allow those spouses of our active duty military to be able to work in a remote position in any agency they choose to? We've clearly shown that remote work is possible. And I don't mean telework where they're expected to be in 1 day a week. I mean truly remote work where they're never expected to be in unless there's a large-scale conference that they need to be able to attend. This would also dramatically open up opportunities for highly qualified individuals in rural America that struggle to be able to find good jobs. This would help those in rural America and would help rural America having stable income into some of those communities where highly qualified individuals could remain in rural America but still be able to work in different jobs in our federal government as they're doing remote work. It would also help folks that are already in the federal family that may work with DHS and work in remote border stations. And that spouse of that individual that's serving our nation would like to have the option to also be able to work in the federal family. These are pragmatic issues that we need to be able to learn from the pandemic and to be able to determine how can we actually turn what was really a painful season into new opportunities to be able to reach out to additional new highly qualified individuals to make our government even run more efficiently in the days ahead. So there'll be quite a few different issues that I want to be able to discuss on this, including the relationship with the CHCO Council and OPM, and to figure out who's got what in what lane and how do we actually simplify that process. I look forward to the ongoing dialogue as we go through this and getting a lot of your testimony on the record for work in future days. Madam Chairman, thank you.
Thanks. We're going to begin the question portion of the hearing. Each senator who wishes to speak will have 7 minutes for questions. I'll start by recognizing myself for 7 minutes. My first question is for Ms. Bailey. By law, CHCOs are accountable for recruiting, retaining, and managing a nonpartisan and professional workforce. That's the same basic mandate that OPM holds. Congress and previous administrations have created entities such as the CHCO Council to improve coordination between OPM and CHCOs, but challenges persist. We want our human resources departments to be run by experts. So what steps should Congress take to ensure that all CHCOs are human capital experts and are apolitical? And what needs to be done differently to allow CHCOs to thrive?
Thank you, Chair Moabin, for your question. I do agree that that CHCOs should be apolitical and they should be career. Oops. Okay. All right. Yes. So I do think that the CHCOs should be career employees, and if not the CHCOs, then at least the deputy CHCOs. But there needs to be within the CHCO leadership a recognition that career experts should be in those positions. One of the main reasons is because federal, as everybody's testified and as this hearing is all about, is that federal hiring is so incredibly complex and difficult to understand and to be able to implement and to do it within the merit system principles. And so having a very strong background in that, whether you come out of DOD or you come out of the Office of Personnel Management and you go into an agency, I think that that's really an incredible first step. The second thing I would recommend is that the CHCO Council to the best of my knowledge, is the only council that is co-chaired by OPM and OMB. It's not actually co-chaired by the very CHCOs who run the agencies, whereas the CIO Council, the CFO Council, the Chief Acquisition Council, all of them are actually co-chaired by the very experts in those positions within the agencies. So I do think that it would be extremely helpful if the CHCO Council was actually chaired by CHCOs and co-chaired by CHCOs on a rotational kind of basis, with OPM providing support and, of course, OMB providing its support as well. So those are just two basic steps that I think would be extremely helpful for the CHCOs and the council at large.
My next question is for Ms. Kyrsten. Your testimony discussed the concern from GAO and other researchers that we're actually going backwards in human capital. If the CHCO Act was amended to provide more autonomy and provide CHCOs a larger voice in the development of regulations, would that alone be enough to reverse this backward slide, or are other actions needed? And if so, what are they?
Chair Sinema, thank you for that question. I would refer to our recent report on the OPM assessment. We made some specific recommendations there for the role of CHCOs in policy and regulation development. We certainly agree that they are the subject matter experts and they need to be consulted. One of the specific recommendations, to Ms. Bailey's point, was that we recommended Congress amend the CHCO Act to specifically create a rotating co-chair for the CHCO Council from the members of the CHCO Council themselves. That will give representation and attention to the concerns of the CHCO and create some stability in terms of their representation. We also recommended that OPM needs to establish a strategic planning and policy office within the organization. That is a well-defined policy development process, leads to more effective, responsive, and transparency policy development that will explicitly then include stakeholders, including the CHCO Council, the Small Agency Human Resources Council, and other stakeholders in policy development. And then, again, to Ms. Bailey's point, the OPM director needs to specifically include the CHCO Council and consider them as partners, strategic partners, and expert advisors, rather than simply using them as a communications tool. They need to have the standing that the other CXO councils have within their professional fields. We think those three things together may not completely solve the problem, but it certainly will communicate leadership attention and put the CHCOs back in the center of policy and regulation development.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Regas. Over the years, Congress has heard from CHCOs about challenges communicating with OPM. There are concerns about not allowing feedback on high-profile matters, such as the Schedule F initiative at the end of the last administration. But the communications challenges stretch to smaller items as well. Since OPM can usually override the CHCO Council on policy matters, what changes need to be made to the CHCO Council setup in order to improve the ability of individual CHCOs to be successful?
Thank you, Chairman. At least during my tenure, I was not aware of any communication challenges with the CHCO Council. In fact, as an OPM director, I probably met more with the CHCO Council, interacted more with OPM during my tenure, probably than any other OPM director in the history of the agency. And that was largely because we were having weekly and biweekly calls with the CHCO Council to navigate our way through the pandemic, to make sure agencies had the flexibilities and authorities they needed, and that we could answer some basic and some fundamental questions about what it was they could do as we were charting, going through uncharted territory with respect to the pandemic. So I totally agree. I think communication is very important. One of the roles that the CHCO Council is there to establish is to provide cross-cutting feedback to the OPM director on issues that are affecting the various agencies that the CHCOs represent, who have missions and workforces that are as broad and diverse as the country they serve. So I think we need more communication. And I certainly did not, I think, suffer from a lack of communication from the CHCOs when I was chair. Thank you.
Thanks. A follow-up. Were there times when you did not take recommendations or seek feedback from the CHCO Council when it came to key OPM decisions like Schedule F that had widespread impact on the workforce? And looking back, do you think there's anything that should have or could have been done differently?
Yeah, like I said, we were communicating with the CHCO Council on a weekly and biweekly basis, like twice a week when I say biweekly, not every 2 weeks. And there were regularly scheduled, I believe, quarterly meetings, the formal ones that are noticed in the Federal Register for the CHCO Council when I was there. Schedule F was an executive order. I think that was apparent to everyone that was something that had to be implemented, but it was implemented through the career CHCOs. So they were tasked with identifying position descriptions for policy-making individuals. So that was actually really a career-led effort across the executive branch.
Thank you. My time's expired, so I recognize Senator Lankford for his questions.
Well, I will try to get my questions down to less than 25 minutes, and then we'll see where we can go from there. Let me open this up for some dialogue here as well, and I appreciate all your input and what you've written in this. And Ms. Bailey, I hope you publish what you put out at some point, because your biography that you have at the beginning of your written testimony of kind of walking through that journey is very insightful to be able to go through all that. But I'd like to just throw a question on the table and have us interact on this. This seems like a tremendous amount of bureaucracy to be able to manage people. And if I can go back to Ms. Bailey's conversation on her saying this is a multi-billion-dollar organization, you're coordinating human capital for 200,000 people, yet you have people above you trying to instruct you on how to be able to do your job. You made the comment saying, I've got this. I would define it better of, if you don't trust me, don't hire me. And what it really feels like at this point, much of what OPM's job seems to be is, I don't trust the people under me, and so I'm going to micromanage them. The CHCO Council is trying to be able to swap ideas and to be able to figure out who's doing a better idea, who's figured out how to get around one of these 100 hiring authorities and figured out how to be able to make it work, who's figured out how to be able to manage people remotely and in telework and other things. And OPM's main job seems to be to say, no, we're going to think about this and we'll get back to you in a year or two. There's a lot of interplay that's happening here, a lot of conversation and dialogue. What I'm trying to figure out is, where is there redundancy and there could be authority put down to be able to make decisions. We don't need 104 hiring authorities. We don't need 105. We need to figure out how to be able to hire, have a specific set of requirements on that, and oversight for individuals that are not doing it well, that are not hitting their targets on it. So how do we deal with this balance between OPM and the CHCOs? And I'd love to throw some things on the table and actually get out there what you really want to say. Can we do that? Ms. Bailey, can I have you start first, since you kind of opened this conversation with, we've got this?
Yes, thank you, Senator Lankford. You know, I think one of the bottom lines is that so many of our laws and rules and regulations and everything are actually written, quite frankly, for the 3% of the workforce, or the 3% really of society that aren't going to follow them anyhow. And so what we've done is we've built an entire system based on distrust. Everything is about whether or not we think an agency is going to do something nefarious. And I think for OPM, and I was there for 7 years, and I loved my colleagues. They're incredibly bright, they're incredibly talented, and they know what they're doing. But their customer is Title V. It's not the agencies. It's to protect Title V at all cost. And so when you're protecting a law and you're not actually dealing with the realism or the practicality of what an agency is actually trying to struggle to do, there's always going to, I think, be just a situation where we're banging heads with each other. Every single day as a CHCO, and yes, over my 40 years, and in particular as a DHS CHCO, every single day was about hiring high-quality individuals. I do not think we need 100 hiring authorities. I've always argued we need 2. One, we need one that I think protects, or at least gives veterans, our veterans, an opportunity to get employment within the federal government in recognition of their service to the United States. That's number one. Number 2, we need a hiring authority for all others, and it should be from all sources. It shouldn't be, there's nothing in the law that says that we have to use USA Jobs. That is done through a regulation that was passed many, many moons ago, and it is incredibly outdated. When we go to a hiring event, I should be able to have the ability to have a conversation with someone, be able to collect their resume, have that conversation, match them up to what skills or what positions I have, and then be able to offer them a position. Those are the kinds of things. Now, should we, I think your Chance to Compete Act, that Chairwoman Sinema has put in place or is working to get passed is actually something that would be beneficial to us, because in that regard, we would be able to at least have really good assessments to be able to get those high quality folks. We can actually hire people within one day. I've proven that in DHS. We had a cybersecurity hiring event. We made job offers in one day. So it is possible to do this, but it takes having subject matter experts involved. It takes having the ability to use the right appointing authorities and just making sure that HR and the managers work together to accomplish that. But again, I hope I'm answering your question. Sure. And I will yield here. So
let me ask this, Mr. Regas, what's the problem with that? Why do we get this interplay back and forth between OPM and the CHCOs? And they have personal good relationships, but there seems to be overlapping responsibilities.
Yeah, I completely agree with almost everything Angie said there. So one of the things that when they say they have to come to OPM for a Mother May I, like we want permission to do a VERA VSIP to offer bonuses for folks to retire early, or approving bonuses for employees over $10,000, those are in statute required by agencies to go to the OPM director for approval. And I remember signing off on these saying, what do I know about this employee at USDA that I'm approving a bonus over $10,000? Nothing, other than the glowing write-up about what they did and they achieved. That is something that Congress should look at and put back into the purview.
How do we get that list? How do we get the list of all those things? This goes back to, if I go to DOD and they say, is anyone reading these reports? We send you 5,000 reports. Does anyone read all these? We have this monster staff that's all they do with these reports. We don't think anyone reads it. How do we get the list of those items? Because in all likelihood, most of those pieces of legislation where someone did something dumb, to go back to Ms. Bailey's comment, at some point it made the news and Congress passed something and said this is never going to happen again.
Right, yeah, it's literally right in Title V. The $10,000 bonus is right in Title V. The VERA VSIP is in Title V. And I think Congress is correct in wanting some kind of check or watchdog to make sure that there aren't abuses when these things happen. But that could also be done by the agency's own Inspector General can take a look at these items rather than going to OPM.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kyrsten, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, sir, thank you. A couple of recommendations that we've made in the OPM assessment. One is that OPM really needs to be refocused beyond Title V. If you think about the CHCOs as their strategic human capital officer within agencies, you want OPM to be the president's strategic human capital advisor. And so we need to refocus it so that we have a comprehensive but strategic organization there at the center of human capital, so that they're thinking about data analytics, they're thinking about lessons learned, they're thinking about training, they're thinking about the future, but that the actual responsibilities to manage the HR community and the workforce in those agencies is delegated to the experts in that agency. So first, we actually do make a recommendation in that report about the specific revision to authorities for OPM in Title V. The second thing I would say is that in association with that reframing so that OPM becomes a more strategic organization, we need to take them out of the compliance mode, which again, as Mr. Regas has said, is really, many of those are articulated in law, and put them into the modern form of risk management, so that where the data shows that there is opportunity or risk, OPM can take a strategic focus there, but they can leave the majority of compliance to the executing agencies. That empowers the CHCOs to do what they need to do within the framework that is established, and moves OPM into that strategic management role for the entire federal workforce, so that CHCOs can do what they are already empowered and able to do, but in a system that actually matches those authorities.
So OPM moves from a compliance organization, and Mother May I, to use your term on that as well, to more of a conversation from the executive branch. Say we have 45% of all federal employees suddenly eligible for retirement. What are we doing about this? How are we helping protect the federal workforce in the days ahead? And then trying to initiate initiatives to be able to help offset that, correct?
Exactly. And right now, OPM can't even see that data because it's not integrated across the enterprise.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I'm going to start a second round of questions, and then if you're interested, we'll do a second round. Great, wonderful. I'm going to turn to Mr. Linkert. Your union, the National Federation of Federal Employees, represents many of the wildland firefighter heroes at both Departments of Interior and Agriculture. The union has partnered with the agencies to try to make firefighting safer and pay an appropriate and fair salary. As Congress is currently reviewing several different proposed bills, including one from Senator Carper called the Tim Hart Act, it appears much can be resolved within existing laws. If CHCOs had more authority to make changes within existing laws, what would be the day-to-day impact on firefighters in my state of Arizona and across the nation? And what would be the downside, if any, of more CHCO authority?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there is a disconnect, as there is between OPM to CHCO. There's also a disconnect between CHCO and some of the workforce that they represent. Between the first part of that answer, I think, is between OPM and CHCOs. Allowing them to move ahead with some of the things they know are within the law and within, supported by merit principles. They can go ahead and I think they need the flexibility to go ahead and do some things. OPM can always audit. The MSPB can always review actions and make corrections if necessary. Congress can always appropriate or authorize. And there's a chance that you could service those wildland firefighters quicker and better. And also answering things like, market pay and so forth, the things that we're struggling with to keep firefighters within the federal service without losing them to state and local fire services. There's also the relationship, the second part is the relationship between the CHCO and the agencies. And a lot of firefighters that I talk to don't believe that the CHCOs in their agencies actually have a full understanding of their needs, what the day-to-day job is like, problems with certifications, the burden, the financial burden. Sometimes they pay for certification training out of pocket because training money doesn't filter down. So part of this, I think, is also taking the CHCOs staff out of their offices and then putting them out in the field with employees. And I think it would be, first of all, fun for CHCO staff to get out and experience some of the real world. Stick them with a fire crew in a forest for a couple of weeks, stick them with a VA nurse and make some rounds on the floor, have them sit on the border. There's a myriad of things that the government does that they can participate in to better understand the needs of those jobs very specifically. And while they're there talking to people, they can also take notes on what that workforce specifically needs, and they can take that back to the CHCO of that agency, and likewise, the CHCO can take it back to OPM if that's necessary. Some of the cons of that is, further we get away from a centralized authority, there's always the possibility that managers or political appointees can push a CHCO in a direction they don't want to go. Either it's illegal or it's unethical or it's pushing the edges of the law that CHCO's not prepared to do or comfortable with. So that has to be carefully observed and corrected, and those CHCOs need the support. If the answer is no to somebody much more powerful than them, they need to be able to have that ability to say no and know that they're not going to get fired or demoted or transferred somewhere in the middle of nowhere as punishment. And the final thought is, as we decentralize some efforts, which I think we can certainly do, we just have to be mindful about fair pay and equal pay across government. We can't lose sight again of those merit principles I keep talking about. Those merit principles are not there to be obstructionists. They are there to remind us that we do have responsibilities greater than us, as that we are dealing with taxpayers' money, not private money, not shareholder money. And we have accelerated level of responsibility, what we do with those funds and those authorities.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Kyrsten. Human resources specialists are often overworked, receive less training, and have fewer standards than in contracting and technology positions. How would you recommend that Congress strengthen HR specialist skills and abilities? And do you think OPM should set more ongoing certification and testing akin to the requirements for contracting officers?
One of the things we have consistently heard in our work around the personnel system is that the HR specialists are not prepared to do the work that we propose in a reimagined HR system. I certainly think that a more strategically focused OPM should be the proponent for the workforce and training development for the HR staff. OPM has been working on a human capital competency model for years. We certainly think that they should finish that up, but you don't want to describe a competency model for the system that you hope will be re-engineered. We want to re-engineer that system and describe the kinds of HR competencies that we want the workforce to have for a system that will work for the future. But once that's done, we absolutely agree that there should be a certificate and credentialing program for the HR staff. that OPM needs to coordinate with agencies to identify those skills and competencies that are needed, to understand how agencies are already training for those skills and competencies, and which of those programs might be able to be credentialed as part of that professional development program, and create both a development program and a progression program that ensures that our HR specialists have the problem solving and management skills to really be partners with hiring managers, again, taking them out of the compliance mode and really helping them solve the problems of the hiring manager and making sure that they get the right people into the right jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Lankert, based on your experience with the Merit System Protection Board, what could be done to prevent Schedule F or similar action that would fundamentally undermine the independence of the federal workforce? And is there any role for CHCOs in that effort?
There is, Madam Chair. Concerning the Schedule F itself, it was just a ridiculous executive order with no legitimate business purpose. Why you would consent to hiring somebody through a special process under the cloak of secrecy. They don't report to anybody. There's no accountability. There's no transparency. There's no duty to report performance. I mean, private business doesn't even do that. I mean, you hire, I can't imagine a CEO hiring, I'm going to hire 10 people. They're kind of going to mill about around the office. They're not going to do anything or report to anybody. Got to be fired in a heartbeat. So when we're talking about the level of scrutiny, and again, the trust that the public places in us, I don't think we should be hiring people with a license to do whatever they want and wander around the government and look for things to do, especially if they're doing it at the behest of somebody else outside of government and they're doing it on the taxpayer's dime. So the whole thing from beginning to end doesn't have any legitimate business purpose as far as I'm concerned. Some of the things that we can do to prevent that from ever happening again is we can, first of all, number one, as I mentioned before in my opening, we can have career executives and career managers supervise political appointees just like they supervise anybody else. There is absolutely nothing wrong with somebody who comes in at a policy level to report to somebody who's been here for a very, very long time. In addition to that, there needs to be some kind of requirements for, I understand that political appointees are direct hires, and it's a lot of wink and nod stuff. Now, I do want to clarify, a lot of political appointees, again, I was one, are very good at what they do. They serve a very good purpose, and having them not completely connected to a bureaucratic process is helpful if you want to get some things done. But it is really an extreme position of trust, and that can be violated very, very easily. And I don't know if the good outweighs the bad. But in terms of political appointees, I've seen some really bad appointees come in. I mean, people who were, office assistants, and then for political reasons, they're suddenly GS-14s and GS-15s, making $100,000 extra a year that they've never earned before. And this is a true story. And you go around the government, you can ask anybody, is there consistency in political appointees with how they work, how they operate, who they report to, what are they doing here? I would be shocked if anyone tells you from the career side that, they got their act together and everything's fine. Everyone's going to tell you that, they come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So we have to do something to regulate or at least some kind of determination on experience and skills when the political appointees come in the door, if there's not going to be any other process to regulate at what level they come in, where they work, and what they do. I think we can do better with reporting conflicts of interest. We can do better with reporting if someone gets a big bonus on the way out from the industry. Now they're coming in as a watchdog, and they got 3 times their annual salary. Now they're going to be a watchdog over this industry for the next 3 years. That's trouble there. And I think that we can also do a little bit better on removal processes for appointees when they're accused of bad conduct or, a repetitive bad performance. There has to be an entity other than purely a political one that can remove them. And I think that's where CHCOs can come in and help quite a bit in all these areas and make sure that these things are regulated and adhered to.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize Senator Carper for his 7 minutes of questions. Senator Carper?
Can you hear, Madam Chair?
Senator, I think you're still on mute.
No, I don't think so.
We can hear you now. Thanks.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. And my thanks to you and Senator Langford for hosting this hearing, calling this hearing, and for inviting our witnesses. This is something that I care about a lot. My guess is, I'm Chair, you and our other colleagues have vibrant constituent services operations in your offices. We have them in Delaware. We only have 3 counties. We have offices in all 3 counties. We have constituent services people in all 3 counties. And very proud of the work that we do. We actually do a survey on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to see how we're doing with respect to serving people, and when they call on a particular issue. And we ask for feedback on how federal agencies are doing in terms of responding to concerns of constituents. And as it turns out, for the last 21 years we've been doing this, my office is up and down the state, all taken together. They're evaluated in these monthly surveys. 96% excellent or good in terms of feedback from people who serve. About 3% fair and 1% poor. The ones that are fair give us a fair evaluation of poor, we call them. In the same surveys, we ask people to evaluate the service that they're receiving from federal agencies. And one of those federal agencies that gets we get a lot of feedback on, you probably do too, Madam Chair, is the Internal Revenue Service, which we underfund. We have too few people working there. We don't have people necessarily with the right skills. And it's something that repeats itself. I don't care what administration. Some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, especially, are, I think, more interested maybe in starving the IRS and making sure that they have the kind of resources they need. But with that sort of as a background, the federal government is here. I think we're here to serve people, serve the American people in a wide range of ways. We can't do it without civil servants. And the chief human capital officers serve in one of the most critical roles in our federal agencies. They are the experts who oversee the hiring and the retention policies for their agencies. Their work directly impacts whether and how well the IRS or the Social Security Administration, which are 2 agencies that get a lot of attention from IRS, from constituents who contact us because they're not getting the service they want or need from either the IRS, in many cases, Social Security. But the work of these folks at these agencies can serve everyday Americans who need their tax refunds in some cases or a disability benefit. My first question is, and this is Ms. Bailey, you have a unique perspective as you have worked both at the Office of Personnel Management in various roles, and you've worked as a Chief Human Capital Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. What can the Congress do now, like right now, what can we do to ensure Chief Human Capital Officers have the authority and the tools that they need to address workforce shortages in the federal government? Please, go ahead. Ms. Bailey.
Thank you, Senator Carper. I appreciate your question. One of the first things we could do, and actually Madam Chairwoman asked this question as well, which is where are all of the authorities and things that you could do to make changes? So the CHCO Council in the last 6 years, but primarily the last 4 years, we actually created an entire list of every single authority in which we believe that should be delegated to the CHCOs, as well as the specific language that we think needs to be changed within Title V. We not only provided that list to the Office of Personnel Management, we actually wrote the legislation to go with it. And so I am sure that the CHCO Council, I'm not there anymore, but I am sure Tracy DeMartini and a few of the others would be more than happy to share with you all of the work that was done. So, Senator Carper, I really think that the number one place to start is to have a meeting with the CHCO Council, have them pull out the list of every single thing that they've asked to have done, ask them to provide you with the legislation that they wrote and provided to OPM, and see if there's a way to have middle ground between yourselves and the CHCO Council in coming up with changes that are absolutely necessary.
Well, that's a very helpful answer. Thank you for that. Ms. Garden, the National Academy of Public Services recommended that to modernize and to reinvigorate public service, something necessary to ensure federal agencies can better serve our customers, is and our customers, I always think of as American public as our customers, but agencies need more flexibilities to tailor their methods to meet their needs. And the Office of Personnel Management needs to evolve from compliance-oriented to customer-focused. I always like to say, ask your customer, whoever the customer might be. But this is a big task and one that has been studied and discussed for years. Where does the Congress begin? That was from Ms. Kyrsten.
It's a great question, Senator Carper, and finding the starting point is always the key to solutions. So we first suggest that Congress consider restating the purpose of OPM to make it a strategic government-wide advisor to the president. But more importantly, not only the OPM assessment, but I would refer us to our No Time to Wait study, where we said the key measure of HR success is agency mission accomplishment. And so to your point about the difficulties that the IRS and the Social Security Agency are having serving their constituents, we have to agree on what the mission is. And if the mission for those agencies is customer service and customer satisfaction, then collectively we need to make sure that we staff and resource those agencies to accomplish that mission. So making OPM a strategic advisor for the entire federal civil service, delegating to the CHCOs in the agencies in a federated model the responsibilities that they need to make sure that their agencies have the workforce necessary to accomplish their mission. And then, as Mr. Lankford has said in his comments, making sure that all of those authorities and flexibilities are bounded by compliance with merit systems principles is our fundamental recommendation for change.
All right, thank you. One last quick question. Mr. Lankford, when I was privileged to chair this committee a number of years ago, we were having actually very similar conversations around federal workforce reform. Since then, there's been some changes, not enough. But every day, Americans still run into obstacles when interacting with agencies, and these obstacles are in part the results of workforce shortages. Question would be, how can Congress further improve its communication with federal agencies and unions to build stakeholder consensus so we can finally implement broader reforms to improve hiring and retention of the federal workforce rather than just talk about them? Go ahead. That was Mr. Lankford, please.
Thank you, Senator. It's a fantastic question, and one that certainly is not an easy one to answer. We do silo in government, as all private business silos. Everyone silos as our natural a tendency as human beings to surround ourselves and deal with the world from that perspective. But we definitely need more interaction between Congress, between government agencies, stakeholders that are out there. The unions are only one part of that. There's a ton of affinity groups out there that deal with all matter of federal employee interest. There are groups that watch over pay and benefits. There's groups that are there for advancements and opportunities and so forth. All of them have a seat at the table at some level. For someone who's had strong, deep relationships with Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, and both Republican and Democrat White Houses over the past 20 years, I'm very comfortable in my own skin up here and speaking with all of you. But to the average employee and to the average citizen, for that matter, it's a very intimidating thing to come up here and talk with all of you, to talk to somebody from the White House, to talk with anybody from Congress. So I think taking some of the mystery out of those relationships would certainly help by just pulling people together more often. And whether that means that we are physically all in one room together several times a year or quarterly, I think that's something to investigate. I think between the Congress and the executive branch, I would love to see more congressional staffers spend time in the executive branch, much like I'd like to see CHCO staff spend more time with the people they administer in their workforce. I would love to see more congressional people come over and hang out in the executive branch in different areas and go out in the field and do things. There's no better way to understand the people that you're responsible for than to actually witness them firsthand. So I think there's a lot of work we can do in that respect, bringing people together, taking a little bit of the mystery out of the process, a little bit of the intimidation away, and through that I think we'll have much better conversations and find better solutions.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Lankford.
Thank you, Senator Carper. I move back to Senator Langford for his second round of questions.
Thank you. Mr. Linkard, let me continue this conversation I started earlier on remote work. Just from your own perspective here, I know there are multiple members of the federal unions that are remote working or they telework. What's your initial concern on a higher number or higher percentage, I guess I should say, of federal workers? Doesn't necessarily increase the number of federal workers, but a higher percentage of those federal workers that are doing work literally all over the country. Military spouses of people that have other federal jobs that are in this federal family, work in a remote area, people that work in or that live in very remote areas, in rural areas, having access. Do you have any concerns on that from the union side?
No concerns. I mean, it's an excellent question, and I think the idea of remote work opens up a world of possibilities. It solves a lot of our problems with hiring in terms of people having to move to a certain location to do a job that they could do somewhere else. I think it's absolutely the gold standard for a lot of our military spouses that keep moving around with their spouses. They get deployed in different places, even overseas. You can absolutely log on from overseas and continue working and doing your job in some number of federal agencies. Right. I think that is an excellent perspective that I had, and I think we have a lot to work on doing that. Now, the good news is with COVID, if anything good came out of COVID, the one thing is we were forced to learn how to remote work, and we were forced to learn how to telework, and no way would we have gotten this far or have this kind of data and interaction if we weren't forced to do this. So we're at a place right now where I think that we're much more accepting of the idea of remote workforce, the benefits of it, in terms of managing and ensuring performance and so forth. And I think it's a huge opportunity for the federal government to open up hiring to a lot of people that ordinarily wouldn't be able to hold these jobs.
Yeah, I'd agree. Ms. Bailey, how does this actually get implemented? What legislative authority is needed? What are right now agencies and CHCOs right now have the ability to be able to start listing jobs as an assumed remote work? Or it could be, I guess it could be listed either way. It could either be someone that's hired in to be able to come into work in the agency, or they could be actually full-time remote and really give them either option on that. Is there any barrier right now legislatively to doing that?
There's not a single barrier. We've always had the ability to offer remote work. It's all based on where the duty location, wherever you want to define a duty location, that's where it will be. If it's someone's home, if it's working out of the YMCA, if it's working in a military installation or at a border patrol station, anywhere you identify that being the duty location is where the person can work. So there's never been a barrier to remote work.
All right, so two big issues then. One is supervision and the other one's culture. Because some people are going to say, I need to see all of the chicks in my nest every single day to know that I can lay eyes on them or I can't manage them. Others are going to say, you never see them anyway. And so what is the difference here on it? So let's talk about culture and let's talk about supervision in that. What are the two barriers that we have?
All right, so both of those are, I would say culture is probably the biggest barrier. It's this belief that just what you just said, right, that everyone has to be sitting all around me. But what I used to say to my supervisors or my executives all the time is, you don't know what people were doing today anyhow, right, because you're not leaving your office. Even take myself as the CHCO. I had 350 employees who worked for me. I had to trust that they were doing their job, whether they were in the office, whether they were across the country, whether they were at the beach. I had to trust that they were actually getting the job done. It's about results. It's about holding people accountable and making sure that you stay in constant touch with them. When you're in these kinds of environments, it's that what you really need to do is concentrate on, again, the accountability, making sure that we get results from folks, and if not, take appropriate action for their inability to either that they can't do the job or they won't do the job. And the second thing is that you should have opportunities for people to come together, whether it's to celebrate, to collaborate, to create. There's always going to be opportunities in which you should bring people together because human connection is still important, right? And so that's the one thing. So from a supervisory standpoint, it is no different, honestly, than if they are across the hall, because half the time you have no idea where they are or what they're doing anyhow, because again, most of the time you're not leaving your office. The second thing is, though, that you talk about is culture. And you cannot legislate culture, just like you can't legislate good management practices, right? And so one of the things that we really have to do, I do believe that the pandemic has helped us at least understand from a culture standpoint, but I will tell you from a DHS standpoint, when I was there, I had to also think about the fact that I have employees who are also still on the front lines, right? So I couldn't be so DC-centric, office-centric, and only think about remote work without thinking about what it's like for the man or woman who's on an ATV or a horse or, you know, doing any of the other things that our folks, our men and women had to do. And so it's being able to, like, I think, wrap your arms around all this and culturally drive for excellence, culturally drive for hiring high-quality employees, culturally drive for engaging with them and starting from a basis of trust. And again, that can't be legislated. It's a leadership issue. It begins with leadership, setting that kind of culture and that kind of environment, and then absolutely driving that, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up. It takes everybody if you're going to actually, I think, really be able to have this kind of environment that I think you're seeking.
Yeah. Mr. Rigas, one of the things that I hear often from different agencies and different CHCOs is they want a good list of highly qualified individuals to be able to choose from. And I hear it all the time to say, OPM provided XYZ, or whoever it is provided XYZ list. I look at the list, I look at the opportunities. I don't have highly qualified individuals here. Where do I go get more? This is a way to be able to say, there's 300 million plus Americans here. You could literally hire for this job from anywhere in the country on it. You've just got to be able to list it, advertise it, engage with it. You've got to be able to have the ability to be able to actually hire people in a timely basis to be able to do it, but they could be from anywhere. What are the barriers to this that you see with OPM, and how do we move into let's hire more highly qualified individuals regardless of where they are in the country?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the initiatives we pioneered when I was acting director was moving more towards skill-based assessments rather than candidate self-assessments.
Right, where I get to check the box and say, yes, I'm very qualified.
Right.
Okay.
And what happens there is because embedded in our merit systems principles is veterans' preference, everyone who checks off that they are most qualified, including veterans, you end up with a cert which has veterans as the top 3 individuals, and people say, well, all I get are unqualified veterans. We need to get rid of veterans' preference, and that's completely wrong. What's wrong is you have everyone self-selecting themselves as highly qualified. So what you need are skills-based assessments, and in that environment, you will get, and as I demonstrated in my opening statement, very highly qualified candidates, and oftentimes more qualified candidates than you have positions for which you can hire at your agency, which brings my second point in, which is shared certificates. You can take that shared certificate and say, hey, I got 8 qualified candidates for this position. I only needed 2. Does DHS or another agency need this HR specialist or an IT specialist that we've already determined is highly qualified? They could then hire off of that cert, drastically reducing hiring time for the federal government.
Right. But we're back to Ms. Kyrsten's statement earlier. That is a shift and a focus for OPM to say I'm a facilitator to these individuals that are actually doing it rather than a permission compliance-based group, but really trying to be able to facilitate that. And Ms. Bailey mentions earlier, there's really just 2 hiring authorities that are needed, one for veterans and one for everybody else. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen that proposal. I mean, I think we certainly need to reduce the number of hiring proposals. The shared certification initiative I mentioned, HHS is already doing that within the many agencies under their umbrella. It doesn't require permission from OPM to do that. Other agencies can do that, CHCO-led at their agencies on their own right now today. That was something I was pushing for at OPM in 2020. We ran out of time to make it a government-wide initiative so that when you apply for something on USA Jobs, you can either click a box, either opt in, or maybe we could make it that you have to opt out if you don't want it shared, but that you are immediately, if you are deemed qualified for this job, you're hired, and you are not hired, that any other agency in the federal government would then be able to hire you.
Madam Chairwoman, can I ask a couple more questions? Yes. Okay. Shorter resumes, opportunities to not have the long written statement for certain levels, that you've got this basically fake paragraph or fake piece that someone else actually you hired wrote for you to be able to then turn in, which has become common in the process. The self-certification. What we're trying to figure out is how do we clean up this whole hiring process, or to be able to say if they're listed in some other platform as some other job platform, a search platform out there, that also they could be then picked up by the federal government as well based on the resume they have there and the skill set be able to fit. What is wrong with any of those?
Yeah, I think that all of the above approach is exactly what we need. You need short, clear job descriptions, which are easy to understand. You need to have the HR folks working in conjunction with subject matter experts who can then, the hiring managers are ultimately the ones who determine whether an individual is qualified or not. So that interaction needs to happen early in the process so that the job posting that the hiring manager wants and the HR specialist are working together to ensure that the assessment correctly reflects what is needed in the job, and then you can have either interviews or writing samples or one final step to ensure that you have the most qualified individuals, and you can move right to hiring.
Yeah, as long as the writing sample is actually that person writing.
Right.
But right now, we assume quite a few of the writing samples are actually someone else writing it for
Right, yeah. So if you have a multi-step process, that mitigates against any one of those sort of being faulty.
What about the opportunity if they've got the resume listed on LinkedIn and it matches what somebody's looking for at DHS, that DHS is able to go pursue them and say, hey, this matches up?
You could certainly do that, but you also have to be careful with merit systems principles. You have to make sure that a position is publicly announced and competed.
No, I get it. It's publicly announced, it's out there. But if their qualifications match what's actually been listed, those folks are being pursued by private companies. They're just not being pursued by the federal government. They may have never considered working in IT in the federal government, but would be very interested in that if only they heard about it. But they've never considered it.
Yeah, I think,
again, if you're in rural Oklahoma, you've not met someone who's worked for the federal government before. You've never considered that until suddenly it pings up and says, I have the qualifications to do this. And they think, I'm going to consider something I've never considered before. Now we're actually recruiting into areas where people would do remote work or possibly even relocate to be able to do it. But the authorities have to be there for the agencies to actually go pursue people and then to be able to get them in the process.
Yeah, no, I think that would be totally fine. Reach out to them and invite them to apply, absolutely,
Right.
Yeah.
But it's got to take less than 90 days to go through the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or 92 and a half as it is currently.
You ought to be able to hire someone and get them in a seat in under 30 days. And I think that's possible, and I think it can be done if we do the right thing.
Ms. Bailey's hired people in one day before.
Right.
So it's doable. So any other comments on this? I know I've gone way over on time, but I want to be able to make sure we get as much as we can on the record.
Senator, if I can just mention one other thing. So DHS is our Title VI, which I don't know if Senator Carper's still on, but I do want to thank him for actually introducing that and giving us that authority. Our cyber talent management system is civil service reform. We completely reinvented everything with regard to recruiting, hiring, pay, compensation, has market-sensitive pay, has the ability to hire, somebody that just comes out of high school and has been able to win a national hackathon as a qualifying factor, right? So it's really thinking about not just today, but into the future. OPM supported that, OMB supported it, and it actually has become a reality. It was implemented November 15th of 2021. So it is my recommendation that your subcommittee take the time to sit down with DHS and have them walk you through all of the benefits of that, because what you will find is that, and one of the things that we've agreed to, is that we would give that playbook to everybody, to every federal agency. So if you were to take Title VI and amend it from just being for DHS and amend it to all federal agencies for all federal positions, you would have civil service reform. And so it took us 7 years to do it, right? It took a tremendous amount of time to peel back the onion on everything, because when you throw away OPM's classification and qualification, you have to actually know what the heck you're doing in order to then be able to build a system for the 21st century.
Senator Langford, if I might make one point towards...
Go ahead, if you're okay with that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Your point about military spouses. When I was at Department of Labor in the Veterans Employment and Training Service, we worked diligently with the private sector on military spouse hiring. And just as an example, USAA, who of course is a very focused veteran employer, was anxious to bring military spouses on, recognizing the value of that hiring pool. They started a program where military spouses, regardless of where they were, could be trained as insurance adjusters and call center operators. So they could be anywhere and support USAA. That grew into strategic career development paths for military spouses recognizing that they were highly qualified, could move around the world, be USAA's hands and feet, basically, in all kinds of places. And USAA's model expanded further in the private sector. To Senator Carper's point about the need to staff up IRS and SSA, especially in the call center and customer-facing responsibilities, I offer that the Veterans Employment and Training Service at DOL is a place to go for that. They have the specific responsibility to support military spouse hiring, and they have a network across the country through the workforce system that helps establish those kinds of relationships. And to the last point about how do we make the more flexible system work, and of course I'm an advocate, as I've said many times, for the strategic reorientation of OPM. We've talked a lot about authorities that already exist, but that people do not take advantage of. And so I want to make sure that we consider the role of the oversight community, the IGs, the auditors, the lawyers. In many cases, there is a culture inside organizations about what is and is not acceptable, what was or was not allowed, but that's separate from what actually is permissible. And if we're going to reimagine the human capital system at the federal government, we need to make sure that the oversight community is engaged, because in many cases, they're the tacit setters of the permission framework within organizations.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Langford. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask one final question, and then we'll close the hearing. I know that at least one person has a travel issue we want to be careful about today. So my final question is for Ms. Bailey. In recent years, we've seen outdated classification standards and rules making it harder to hire people in emerging STEM fields, as well as preventing us from reskilling employees in obsolete fields. Some classification standards have not been updated since JFK was president, and the current system doesn't account for the multidisciplinary knowledge needed for many senior positions. Based on your experience overseeing classification policy at OPM and in creating a new cyber personnel system at DHS, is there a way to empower CHCOs so they have more ability to design jobs and credentials that still uphold merit principles?
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for that question. It is absolutely possible to do this. This is one of the reasons why we walked away from the classification system for our cyber talent management system, is because we recognize that it just cannot keep up with where we are. But I want to stress, it is not just about the CHCOs, and this is where I said it takes the whole, C-suite, but it also takes leadership. It was because of my partnership with the CIO as well as CISA, our cyber agency within DHS, that we were able to create what we did under CTMS. That is where we were able to identify what are the current skills and things that you actually need in order to be able to not just fill the positions, but actually meet the mission needs. So we walked away from positions. You won't see anywhere on USA Jobs that we're hiring a position. We will say instead we're looking for folks that have a technical background or know forensic network and have been able to do some other things, or maybe worked in a nonprofit with regard to human trafficking and all. Because what we're really trying to do is find the people. And once we get the people in, we can then work out where it is that they're going to work, what kind of jobs that they're going to have, and then how we're going to actually pay them. So it's a very private sector way of looking at this versus trying to box everybody into a PD, position description, that doesn't really cover what it is that they do anyhow, and then box them into a job description that nobody really understands, and then they put in a bunch of buzzwords and check 1 through 5 that they can walk, talk, and chew bubble gum, and we never get the right qualified people. So it all kind of goes together. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that what we really need to do is we need to re-examine all of this. And again, from a DHS perspective, we have the playbook, the entire playbook on how to do this. It was through every attorney. It is through OPM, through OMB, and every single agency concurred with DHS's cyber talent management system. So I really encourage that you take a look at that, because, again, I think it is the answer to where we need to go with regard to seeking out and qualifying potential applicants into our positions.
Thank you. And with that, we've reached the end of today's hearing. I appreciate all of our witnesses for your time and testimony and thank our colleagues for their participation. This is an important subject, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to improve security for the Civil Service Human Resources function. Today's hearing record will remain open for 2 weeks until March 16th of 2022. That is when questions for the record are also due. Thank you all again. We are adjourned.